It's June 3rd, 2019, and welcome to episode 12 of the Yoga Can podcast, Getting Mindful About Sex Through Yoga. I'm Lauren, your host. This episode might not be suitable for children. Hello to any new listeners out there, and welcome back to you if you have been here before. Yoga Can is a podcast where I travel around the beautiful Pacific Northwest, talking to yogis and yoking our incredible yoga community. Welcome and please subscribe. I hope each of you are doing well as we are on the brink of summer. All things are good here within my camp. The dogs are happy and healthy. The husband is happy and healthy and working very hard on our sleeper van so we can have some epic adventures in it this summer. And I'm doing pretty good. The podcast is beginning to pick up, and I have connected with so many interesting yogis and have some great interviews lined up, which I am super excited about. If you know of any yogis who you think would be a good guest for the podcast, please let me know. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. What does sex mean to you? Where does sex begin for you? Where does it end for you? How comfortable are you talking about sex? With your partner, friends, kids? When you were growing up, was sex something that your parents talked to you about? My guest for this week's episode is Jocelyn Ribar. She is an amazing, awesome yoga teacher. And besides being a yoga teacher, Jocelyn is also a sex therapist. In this episode, Jocelyn expands on this topic of what sex is and asks us to peel back the layers by using mindfulness to empower our own sexuality.
So another piece too that I, talk about with my clients is, how are you defining sex, first of all, and how can we broaden that definition, right? So even for me, I help them really broaden it. So not even just what's happening in that specific interaction, but, how are you, your sex life, right? How are you talking with your partner? How are you, intimately connecting with them? How are you touching, even not in a sexual way necessarily, but when you're cuddling, when you're hugging, holding hands, right? All of these things to really broaden, okay, this is what my sex life looks like. Right. And it's not just how often am I having penetrative sex with my partner, right? It's, how are we connecting?
One quick thing about this episode, Jocelyn and I were sitting outside recording with our dogs, and at the end of the recording, a service truck came up and started working, which created a lot of noise. So we moved inside, and for some reason, the audio kind of shifted for about the last 5 minutes of the episode. I'm super sorry about that, but I hope you enjoy the background noise of the birds and the occasional dog bark. Please enjoy getting mindful about sex through yoga. I'm interested in how, if you intersect those two worlds, sex therapy and
it's a huge
yoga.
Mindfulness piece for some, and sometimes, there are gentle postures and things like that, if people experience pain or something, but there's more of understanding mindfulness and how to experience your body, that kind of thing.
How do you get people into that headspace to begin to, in your sessions, or is it different for every person?
Well, it's different for every person. I mean, because you have to understand everyone, every client who comes into my office, their own experience with mindfulness, right? People's assumptions of mindfulness, right? You hear all the time, it's just, I'm supposed to not have any thoughts in my mind, right? Or I'm meditating, I'm sitting on a pillow or whatever.
And I'm quiet. That means that
I'm quiet.
Meditating.
Yeah. But really the experience of mindfulness being, am I just aware of what's happening in this present moment right now? And if you think about, doing a mindfulness exercise, breathing, or just a body scan, just understanding what different parts of your body feel like when you're just, sitting or standing or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
Then that translating to when you're, in a sexual experience, whether with yourself, with a partner, are you really just present and feeling and observing and experiencing instead of trying to push for something or get to like an orgasm or pleasing your partner or trying to get pregnant or something. Like, there's so many goals you can have, but the goal that we want is to just be present and mindful. So you're just experiencing, sensing all that stuff.
So you're really so you're just kind of enjoying the moment, enjoying the ride, and not thinking so much about when is this going to be over, or are we going to be pregnant after this? Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Are those some issues that people bring to you?
Yeah. So I've worked with, a lot of the people that I work with have pretty low interest levels. And so a lot of that can be, a lot of what it comes down to when I'm kind of exploring, diving deeper into, okay, what's going on, right? Not necessarily forcing, okay, you have to be interested in this, but just exploring, okay, why are you experiencing this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the time, there can be like an issue within the relationship or something, maybe some resentment or anger or, trauma or something like that. That's creating some kind of disconnect there, that it's like, well, I don't want to, engage sexually with you if I'm not, emotionally connected to you, right?
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, but the other piece too being, a lot of women I'm finding haven't been like given this permission necessarily, or this experience to fully understand their own bodies or their own needs. Right? I mean, I feel like we as women have this expectation of, pleasing our partners.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's a woman, whether it's a man, whoever your partner might be, right? But a lot of times, you're having sex, and let's say, there are two, cisgendered people, a female and a male, having sex, and when the male finishes, then sex is over, right? Like, totally, that's the thing. And so it's like, okay, well, we're done, but it's like, what about your needs? Like, are you satisfied? Are you,
I don't mean to laugh, but that doesn't really happen in our house.
Well, you're out of the norm, which is great. You're like, we're not done, right?
No, but he's more like the other end.
Totally.
I got very lucky. Yeah. Very blessed.
It's interesting, just kind of the longer I do this, the more I notice themes, right? Of like, okay, this makes sense because, and unfortunately, a lot of times there's like a religious background too of, suppressing your own sexuality for a huge part of your development, right? When we're sexual beings from the day we're born, right? And a lot of times we're taught like, oh my gosh, don't do that. That's so shameful. That's bad. That's a sin, right? I have clients who've been just exploring their own bodies, at the age of 6, 8, 10, right? They're looking at themselves in a mirror, or they have their hand on a part of their body that, oh, that feels good. What is that, right? And then their parent walks in and shames them and is like, that's horrible. Why are you doing that? Oh my gosh, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Right? And that's so common, right?
Yeah.
So then we shut down this part of our own like sexual development. And then all of a sudden, potentially we get married and it's like, okay, go have sex all the time and make babies, right?
Or even when you go to like college or as you just get older and you grow and like your puberty develops, and then you start to seek awareness or seek, pleasure, and you're experiencing your own awareness of like your body with a partner who might have experienced something very similar where they were like suppressed. So you're with like two suppressed people who aren't feeling comfortable, who have no idea really what's going on.
Right.
And that
the other piece for me, when I'm thinking about even like where pleasure is happening, this is something that kind of comes to mind for me, is if in our mind we're constantly thinking like, okay, this isn't about me, right? This is about my partner, and I just want my partner to feel pleasure. If both people are doing that, like not allowing themselves to experience any pleasure, then where is pleasure even happening? Right? Like if both of us are like, well, I'm going to, make you experience something or help you, have an orgasm or whatever it is, but you're not open and willing to receive that yourself, and neither is your partner, then where is that even happening? Yeah. Right? And there are so many, right? I mean, everyone has their own experience in this, but I just find that interesting too, to be like, wait a second, Like, where are you feeling that for
Right.
yourself, right? So not in a way of making, like, you should be selfish all the
Right.
time, right?
Yeah.
It could sound that way. But in a way of, okay, if everyone's just mindful and sharing in this experience, and yeah, you do things to, please your partner, but if you're shutting your own experience off, then you're missing out on a huge piece of that.
What's really neat about what you're talking about and what you do is more like in the body stuff, more mindful, bringing it to the, like you talk about it through your mouth, but you also want your clients to, it sounds like, to also come into their body and express where they're feeling pain, pleasure, resentment, joy, euphoria.
Right.
That's neat. Because that's a great way to merge therapy. Because so much of, trauma is stored in our body.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much of our life is stored in our body. Everything we do is in our body. So it's neat that's sounds like your approach.
Well, and you had asked kind of how I go about that.
Yeah.
And, in asking people about kind of their experience of mindfulness, right? Like we were talking about earlier. A lot of people will be like, well, I've tried an app or whatever, and, it's okay. And I do it before I go to sleep, and that's a lot of people's experiences with it now, right? But I think what's interesting is if we can get a really solid understanding of just what it means to be mindful, because that's accessible all the time, right? You can be driving in your car, having a mindful experience of like, okay, what do my hands feel like on the steering wheel, right? What am I smelling as the windows roll down?
Right.
What does the breeze feel over my skin, right? What does that feel like? The only way you can get there is if you're aware of what those senses even are, right? And so that's kind of step one, right? How do we just notice and experience, right?
Yeah.
And so before it even gets to, like a sexual aspect of it, right? I encourage people to create kind of a mindful just way of living, or a practice, if you will. So I do just some like body scans and things like that in, session with my clients. Right? And the interesting piece of this too is that, if you think about, okay, if people do an app or someone guides them through a meditation of some kind, like let's say a body scan, for example. Right, if you think about someone walking you through a body scan, let's start at your toes and notice all these different parts of your body going, up your legs, up your body, your shoulders, your arms, your neck, all that kind of thing. But how often do you experience a mindful like body scan where someone tells you to notice like your pelvis and your genitals, right? Pretty much never.
Yeah.
Right? Interesting. That's a part of your body that very often stores a lot of emotion and a lot of trauma.
You sort of just scan right over those hips.
You just go,
like,
okay, here's my hip and there's my belly.
Right.
But all these other things that are a major part of your existence and just you being a human, right, we just totally skip over. And it's like, okay, why is that? Are we uncomfortable with that? Are we, avoiding that? Like, what's the reasoning behind that? Is it weird to say genitals or something?
Right. It could be a level of, is this appropriate?
Sure.
Will I get in trouble? Because a lot of teachers, teach in a studio that they don't own or in a place that's not theirs.
Yeah.
So they're holding space in someone else's area. So maybe they don't want something. They don't want to get in trouble.
Sure.
What do you think? Yeah. Do you think that could be possible?
I mean, that can totally be possible, right?
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate piece of that too, right? I mean, I'm not saying everyone go talk about your, like, do a mindfulness and, focus on your genitals, right? But that's a part of your body.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
And so, especially if, someone's coming into my office and we're trying to get to a place where we're trying to access, who we are as sexual beings, and can I find more desire and interest in this? That's a place that you want to focus, right? And so there's a piece of it. I actually just did this last night with a client, who's in my office. I was like, okay, we're going to do this body scan. And it was interesting because I, we kind of moved up one leg and then over like from hip to hip. And then we ended up, at the genitals at one point. And of course, after I do this scan, I check in with the client. I say, okay, how was that for you? How is this different than other times you've had a mindful experience like this or a body scan. And then kind of adding this question as you check in of, you know, how can this, like as you're scanning your body, how can this relate to your sexuality, right? Or your sexual experience. And this is actually something, you know, Larly Content, who's a very prominent, you know, mindfulness sex therapist in the field. She focuses a lot on that kind of how do we do these different exercises, you know, of getting in tune with our body, right? So this mindfulness piece of, you know, how do I get out of my thoughts and into my body, just into my experience, right? A lot of these things that kind of build into more of that sexual encounter experience, right? So it's not just, okay, do this once and then you're gonna be good when you go have sex, right? You know, or a sexual encounter. It's okay, how do you make this a part of just how you're existing so that when you are in these different interactions, that's just happening and you're just feeling and
you're
noticing.
there. Yeah, and starting outside of the bedroom or outside of your genital region. Just
well, and then
start,
it's
like,
often more accessible.
Yeah, it is totally.
Yeah, to be like, okay, let's simplify this, right? Let's just scan your body. Let's just notice kind of what you're experiencing, and
and
a lot of times, you know, if you're in an exercise and you're thinking, okay, focus on my right shin, right? It's like, I don't really know what that feels like. Even that experience of not feeling, right? What does that feel like for you? Do you start to think about something else? Do you try to create an experience? Right? At the conference I was at this weekend in Toronto, a sex therapy conference I was at, we did this mindfulness exercise. Larly Content was there, and she walked us through a lot of different exercises. And I noticed for myself when I was in one, and she was like, okay, you know, focus on your right toes, right? And I noticed myself like wiggling my toes. So I was like, I'm trying to create some kind of experience so that I can, I don't know why, so I can feel something or can experience, right? And then she had kind of cued, you know, what is it, if you don't feel something, what does it feel like to not feel? And so I was like, okay, maybe just notice that instead of trying to create something. So then when it comes back to that question of how can this relate to your sexuality, right? For me, it's like, okay, am I trying to force something or create something when I can just kind of relax, sit back, and just notice? Right? And that's where a lot of, like, you know, distress can often show up of I'm trying to create something or force my way into something, you know, and then I'm upset with myself because I didn't get there, or I didn't have an orgasm, or I didn't experience something that I really wanted to. It's like, can we just kind of be okay with what we are experiencing?
How did you feel when you stopped trying to, like, wiggle your toes? What did you experience?
It was interesting because I did kind of have to hear that cue from her of like, what does it feel like to not feel? And then so I just kind of had to notice that and think, I don't really know what I noticed, to be honest with you. It was kind of like, oh, well, I'm not feeling. Can I just be okay with that? It was more of just like can I create this experience of acceptance and kind of like contentment of, okay, like I'm not gonna maybe feel something very specific right there, and that's okay. Right, so a huge piece of this too is coming from, you know, whatever you're noticing, a place of non-judgment, right? So it's so easy for us to, like, I could have easily gone to judgment, right? Of like, oh my gosh, I don't feel anything. Like, why don't I feel anything? I'm questioning this. That's bad for some reason, right? When the whole purpose of this is to come from a place of no judgment, right? No criticism. And same thing when you step on your yoga mat, right? We bring our egos with us, right? We bring our past yoga practices with us of, I could do a handstand this day. I did all these arm balances. I can do 15 million chaturangas in a row. When it's like, can I just meet myself where I'm at that day, right? Can I just, you know, come from a place of not judging myself if I, like yesterday when I was teaching, I was traveling all day on Sunday, you know, from Toronto to get back here, and my body was so tight, right? And my mind automatically wanted to go to, you were gone for like 5 days. You didn't step on your mat once. You didn't stretch out. Like, what's wrong with you? You knew you were going to feel like this. But then I was like, wait a second, catch myself. Like, it's okay. I was doing so much stuff. I'm happy with what I did this weekend. I, you know, brought so much knowledge into my mind and met so many people. So many beautiful things have happened, right?
Yeah.
Don't judge this. Just meet it with where I'm at. I can't change this.
No.
Right?
That's how I feel when I go on a trip and I have my and I pull my yoga mat out of the car and I look at it and I say to myself, I didn't pull you out once.
Yeah. Right. I'm sorry, yoga mat.
And I think, why did I even bring you?
Right. Yeah. But it's so easy to automatically go to judgment, right?
It is.
Of
you get disappointed in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you, as a teacher in the classroom, create that mindfulness or awareness or about that to your students if they're, feeling judgmental or upset with themselves? Do you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, and I am very transparent in my classes too. I'm not one to like swallow it and step in and be like, okay, we're here for yoga and it's gonna be beautiful and all this stuff, right? If I'm in a, really shitty mood or I've had a really tough week or day, I don't necessarily throw that on my, practitioners, but I'll say, I'm kind of struggling today. Like, I need some good energy, like throw out some love into this space. But I'll be transparent about like, hey, I found myself, judging myself today. And this is how can we, catch those thoughts when we see them and, slow them down and just take a breath and just, notice, right? Just observe. Like, how can you be the observer of your own experience in this?
Yeah.
Right? And so part of that for me is being transparent with the students. But also even, noticing if you can see when people are kind of forcing themselves into something, right?
Yeah.
And so even just kind of a gentle, I'm not going to call anybody out in class or anything, but just a gentle, like, if your body's not feeling that today, like, that's okay, right? Like, it's okay. Just meet yourself where you are, right? Kind of this consistent reminder throughout class. Right. So not just at the beginning, it's consistently grabbing hold of those little reminders to kind of share with the class.
And pulling back into the pose or back into the breath or whatever it is to kind of just be more mindful, feel the skin, feel the body in the pose and see what's going on. Because I know I see that look on some students' faces and I just can tell that they're pushing it. And sometimes some students, that's just where they're at.
Sure.
They're not out of place yet to
And it's not
mindful.
My place to judge that, right? To say don't do that for yourself.
Right.
Like another part of that too is, at the beginning when I do set up the class, I'll say, do what you feel you need today, right? So if you feel like you want to push yourself and like try something and scare yourself, go for it, right? If you feel you need to take it back and be more passive, right? Do that too, right? Don't worry about what's going on next to you or what your class looked like yesterday. Like, just be here right now.
Yeah, you're very powerful when it comes to your cueing.
Oh, thank you.
And not the body cueing, not the poses, but you're good with that, but your opening statement, I guess, is just really profound. And for me, at least, it really hit home. It just hit me home. And then also throughout the class, you're just really powerful in your verbiage about bringing me back into the body, bringing us back into my own experience, not anyone else's.
Sure.
And that's really powerful stuff.
Yeah. And something I remember too, when I was doing my teacher training,
where did you do that again?
So I did it here in Spokane at Lila.
Okay, yeah.
And so that was in like 2012. So that's crazy to me. But I remember because so Bear was our teacher. And we would do his class like every weeknight, and then we would meet afterwards and talk and decompress and all that kind of thing. But so often he would come up to me and he'd be like, "You stop breathing." He'd be like, "You're not breathing right now." And that's just like stuck with me for so long. Of okay, how can I notice if I'm holding my breath, if I'm not breathing, or if I'm trying to force my breath somewhere else? And so I have started to, take that place of noticing when my students are not breathing either, right? If I'm touching them, adjusting them in a pose, I can notice sometimes they'll take a deep breath, but then it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm like, where are you holding this? Like, where did it go? Kind of a thing. And so I kind of give them gentle reminders just to them of, okay, like, breathe. Right? It can be kind of comical at the time too of like, you're not breathing, right? Like, okay, let's let's find it, right? But that's just kind of stuck with me a lot too. And it's such a powerful thing, right? The breath is such an anchor to, you know, our practice, to the present moment, right?
It really is.
So it's like, if you can just find a breath, then you're there.
Yeah.
You're in that moment of it.
it.
Well, another piece too, I mean, to kind of connect it back to the sexuality piece, you know, a lot of people that I talk to, you know, when they feel this pressure that we're talking about, right? This pressure to, you know, get to an orgasm or whatever it may be, you know, they're like, I find myself really holding my breath, right? And even in our yoga class, you know, we're in a warrior C, we're balancing. And if you're holding your breath, you're holding in all of this tension and this weight and this stress, right? And to let it go, you have to breathe, right? To like release yourself of that, you have to breathe. And so you're not going to get anywhere in a sexual experience if you're just holding your breath and filling yourself up with tension, right?
Yeah.
You know, breathing and relaxing and experiencing, right? It's all, you know, connected in that way.
What are some practices that you've given clients before in the room, maybe not in the bedroom, or maybe like beforehand? What are some breathing techniques that you've given them?
Well, even so, just simply noticing what your breath is doing, first of all, right? Because, I mean, we as yoga people, right, that's a huge part of our everyday life now, right?
Oh,
I
totally.
mean, I've been
right now,
totally
like, talking about it, I'm overthinking.
How am I breathing, right? But that's just totally where our mind goes, because we're immersed in that world, and we get it, and we understand it, and we see the purpose of it. But so many people don't understand it, right? We just breathe, and we have to do that to survive. But a lot of people don't focus on it or bring their awareness to it. Right? And so even just in session of, okay, you know, closing your eyes, like, I want you just, without changing anything, just notice how you're breathing, right? Where's it going? Is it just really shallow into the back of your throat? Is your mouth open? Are you breathing through your nose, through your mouth? Like, just simply observing, right? First of all, to then get to a place of like, okay, how can we maybe add different little cues here and there? Like, can your, you know, exhale be longer? Can you breathe in and out your nose? Can you, you know, but first, just again, that simple, what does it feel like to even breathe, right?
Yeah, starting off at like that basic layer. Wow, that's so cool. And do you ever supply poses for your students? Or for your clients?
Like yoga poses?
Yeah,
or sex
yoga
poses?
That's what I really want to get into. Like, there's some sex poses.
You know, sex poses hasn't really necessarily been much of a conversation. Unless, I mean, I'm asking people, you know, my clients, you know, especially if they experience like discomfort or pain anywhere, right? If sometimes they'll say, well, certain positions don't feel good. Like this, you know, pokes here or it feels weird here. And so that's kind of more when we get into like, okay, well, physically, what's your body doing and what's uncomfortable about that, or what works, like what feels good. But sometimes, more with, you know, pain clients, we would call them, I guess. Sometimes, you know, I work closely with a physiotherapist in town too, and she specializes in pelvic, you know, issues, mostly with women, but she works with men as well. And she's kind of recommended to me with some of the clients that we share, you know, hey, do a little, you know, some of these yoga poses, you know, in session with them. I think that would be helpful. And so just some gentle hip opener type things, you know, it's not anything that's going to be too strenuous. But again, the bigger piece of it, I think, you know, if you're doing something gentle, if you're sitting upright or you're in maybe a yogi squat, you know, a supported squat with blocks or pillows or something, it's what are you noticing, right? How mindful are you in that? Can you feel your body kind of like relaxing in that space, right? You know, not necessarily giving yourself a goal to relax, but just to feel and notice.
Dropping them back out, like bringing their mind down to the body.
Yeah. Sure.
That's just kind of what you're going, like that's what it sounds like you're just going back to, is bringing your students back into that body awareness, pulling out of the mind. Yeah. Sure.
So there are exercises that we do individually for that kind of experience. And then there are, you know, a couple exercises that you can do, right? You know, we have one of our main, you know, sex therapy techniques, right? A very old technique is sensate focus. And so just as it's called, you know, sensate, senses, right? So you are trying to bring yourself into an experience of noticing what all of your senses are doing, right? The purpose of this is to feel, notice, explore, without the expectation of having sex, right? Sex is not, like, intercourse is not a thing, in this exercise, because it takes that pressure away, that idea that I have to get somewhere, I have to travel in this, get to this end point. That's off the table. So you can just be present with, okay, this isn't going anywhere. It's just, I'm experiencing, different touches with my partner. And it's set up. I could go off for, hours about how to do this exercise, but that's just the very, very basic idea of it, right? Is kind of relieving anxiety, right? So getting out of your mind and into your body experiences.
Yeah. Wow. Just so they can be more, like, with their partner, more with their own body, and not think so much about what's going to come next.
Yeah. And we're finding, there's a lot of research out there now about this kind of thing, that, this can actually help kind of increase that desire, right? That interest kind of shows up again when you're just present and aware of your own body, your own experience.
And you're not just like rushing through all the foreplay. Right. You're
totally.
And just to get to sex. And
that's part of it, right? So people define sex as like penetration of some kind, right? And that's just the main event.
Right.
But like, what about all these other things that are pleasurable and, intimate and help you connect with your partner? Even like eye contact or breathing or touching in different ways, kissing, right?
Like
all
hand
these
to
things.
touch massages,
Totally.
hand to body massage. Yeah.
Right. So another piece too that I, talk about with my clients is, how are you defining sex, first of all, and how can we broaden that definition, right? So even for me, I help them like really broaden it. So not even just what's happening in that specific interaction, but, how are you, like your sex life, right? How are you talking with your partner? How are you, intimately connecting with them? How are you touching, even not in like a sexual way necessarily, but when you're cuddling, when you're hugging, holding hands, right? All of these things to really broaden, okay, this is what my sex life looks like.
Right.
And it's not just how often am I having penetrative sex with my partner, right? It's, how are we connecting?
So what you're saying then is sex isn't just in the bedroom. It's all of our interactions kind of with a significant other or with whoever we're with sexually.
If you connect with that idea of like this, our sex life can be, that broad.
Well,
right?
Is it that broad? Because if there is resentment issues or jealousy, trauma that happen outside of the bedroom, it sounds like sex is everything.
Yeah.
Like we're always in a sexual experience in a way. Not always in a sexual experience.
Well, what's interesting? When I was in...
It can affect...
Right. When I was in my grad program, in my human sexuality class, my teacher at the time had challenged us to notice, like in any situation, there can be like an aspect of sexuality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, even you and I looking each other in the eyes, like sexual.
Yeah.
Not
well,
sexual,
we're just
but
sexual
like
beings.
Yeah, we're just looking at each other. Yeah.
And I'm sure people can, maybe try and fight me on that, and that's fine, right? But I think when I'm working with a couple, I really want to challenge them with that, right? To see like, okay, our intimate life is, wrapped up in our sex life,
right? In
our communication, in just how we interact with each other.
There's not a separation at the door of the bedroom.
Well, and I mean, if I have a client coming in, to initially talk about a non-sex related issue, right? At some point it gets there, right? And if I have someone coming in immediately with like, I've got this sex issue and I want to talk about this, it gets into other things.
Interesting.
Like their relationship or their resentment or, their history, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's all fluid. It's all connected. Right? And as yoga instructors, we know this. Right. Everything's connected, but,
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating.
It really is.
Conversations with people of, and of course my, how I am as a therapist, my lens is through kind of a sexuality, aspect, right? And so I can turn any sort of conversation in that direction, right? Because to me it's relevant. And I really think that it is.
Why did you get into this?
Oh my gosh. Great question. People ask me that all the time. I find myself, I get just so jazzed talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I can tell.
I just get so stoked. Like, even being at the conference this weekend, I was like, oh my God, this is so incredible. In college, I remember kind of being that person that people would, you know, ask questions to, right? Of like, gosh, I'm like struggling with this partner or this issue or whatever. And not that I had any great advice or anything at the time, but I think it was a comfortable conversation, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, don't talk to me about that. That's ugh, right?
Like, ew, you're talking about
It's just
sex.
natural.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is something that we are all sexual beings, right? Whether you have sex, you have intercourse, you know, are asexual, right? If there's, you know, not much desire, right? Wherever you fall, we're all sexual beings, right? And the fact that some people don't even address this or talk about it at all in, you know, a therapeutic setting is really disappointing to me, to be honest with you. It's hard. I understand that not everyone feels comfortable with talking about it, but it's important to, right? It's important to acknowledge that that's a thing, right? And so, to get back to kind of why I got into this, initially, you know, going into my grad program, I was like, couples. I want to work with couples, relationships. I want to help. That sounds amazing. And then part of that being kind of what I've been talking about of like, why are people not really addressing the issue of sex very often?
Right, because if you're dealing with a couple,
That's
you know,
a
who are
huge part,
partners,
right? Huge part.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and so, you know, getting to that place of like, okay, this is something we have to talk about, right? And knowing that we all, you know, experience some, I mean, distress can be a word used, but for varying levels for everybody, right? Some people have very high levels of distress or discomfort or whatever you want to say around sex. And other people might have like, well, I have, you know, I'm just frustrated right now or whatever it might be. But that's go ahead.
So do you only work with couples then?
No.
Okay.
I do both. So I work with couples and individuals. So a lot of times, I love when the couple comes in together because it's so helpful to have both perspectives in the same room.
I can imagine.
Talking about it, right? That's the most useful. But I do get a lot of individuals who show up. A lot of times I will say, you know, a lot of my caseload right now are, you know, middle-aged women who've been married for, you know, maybe around 10 years. And they kind of come in with this idea that, like, it's me, right? I'm not interested in sex right now. And so I need to come in here and, like, fix this problem, right? When it's like, okay, well, there's not necessarily, like, it's not a problem to be fixed, right? Let's explore what's going on here.
Yeah. Carve out space around what you're thinking.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
explore
And
it.
as a
Cool.
so a lot of times I start with the individual and I do work with that person. A lot of times, since I'm a marriage and family therapist, and so my lens, of course, you know, alongside sex is relationships, systems. And so, you know, I'll say, well, you know, it'd be really helpful, you know, to be able to really talk about this with your partner. And so if it gets to that place, you know, I'm not going to start couples work with that person because I already have this strong relationship with that person.
Right.
And so to bring in their partner, there's already this imbalance. Sometimes I'll bring them in for like 1, maybe 2 sessions just to kind of add that to the therapy I'm doing with that other client. But a lot of times I'll refer to say, hey, maybe do some couples work for a little bit, if it gets to that place, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to hear someone coming in and saying, this is just me. It's only me, and I have to change myself to help my sex life. And it's like, well, let's challenge that a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
unless you're just having sex with yourself.
Right. Sure. yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Do you encourage that with people to get to know them? So you start with the mindfulness piece of if you're driving in the car, you use that analogy, you know, where are my hands doing? What are my feet doing? Where's the air on my body? So what's then the next level to that? Do you encourage people to explore themselves physically, intimately? Do you ever go there?
Especially for, again, most of my caseload right now is cis women. And so a lot of times we get to a place of like, how well do you know your own body? Right? Do you know where things feel good? Do you know where things even are? Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of women don't, right?
Yeah.
A lot of women are like, wait, I don't actually know where these, nerve clusters are, or, these certain spots, how to get there. And it can be slightly different for everybody, right? Everyone's, built differently. And so, sometimes we'll do exercise, obviously not in session, but, exercises of, can you look at yourself, right? That can be a huge one too, of can you put a mirror down and just look at yourself and explore, like, do I understand what these different parts are?
Right.
And that's really telling too, because if people are really comfortable with that, then it's like, okay, good, right? We can get to a place now of how can you like physically explore that and feel that. But a lot of times there's a massive, discomfort with that, of like, I just can't even look at myself, right? And so then that's like, okay, let's take a step back and let's explore kind of, that discomfort and what's going on for you there.
Is there any research into why it's difficult for some people to look at themselves down there with the mirror?
Sure. Trauma, just as kind of a blanket statement, right? Kind of the stuff that I was talking about earlier, right? Of, if maybe you had an experience when you're doing that and you got caught or something, and someone totally just shames you and says, that's dirty, that's terrible, why are you doing that? A lot of us have experiences like that, right? But it might not be so prevalent and like, oh, I remember that as being so traumatic.
Well, yeah, because
right?
it was
but
so
it
long.
Still stays, right?
Totally. Yeah, it's still there.
So a lot of times with clients, they'll be like, well, I don't really, if we're exploring kind of their sexual history, and they'll be like, I don't really think, I have any instances like that or anything, but then something might might show up for them where they're like, actually, I do remember, when I was changing in the locker room in high school or something, and someone pointed at me and laughed, or just these things that can seem very subtle, but have these lasting impacts of my body's gross, or I'm not wanted, I'm not enough, all these kinds of things.
Yeah. I never thought about sex so broadly before. So, and it's
because most people just put it in this like small little box, right? Of it's penis
bedroom.
in the vagina, right? Like that's all that it is, right? But I mean, if we think about the kinds of sex that people are having even, right, is gay men having sex, gay women having sex, trans people having sex, right? That looks so different. You can't just say trans people having sex, right? There are so many different kinds of trans people, different kinds of anatomy, different, things happening with your body, different surgeries. There's so many different things happening. Yeah.
Right? Oh, that'd be what a wild experience. Because if someone does go through surgery, you probably work with them and sit with them through rediscovering themselves, I bet, in
I haven't
a way.
yet had any clients who've had bottom surgery. I've had clients who've had top surgeries.
Okay.
So, top surgery is obviously referring to, breasts, whether that's removing the breasts or, having, breast implants, that kind of thing. Bottom surgery, adjusting your genitals, that kind of thing. I haven't had any of that yet. I've had clients who've had, like full hysterectomies and things like that, female to male.
Right.
Clients.
Or maybe even people who have had hysterectomies because of like, they might have a disease.
Sure. Yeah. But the really interesting thing, absolutely.
Like sick, like cancer or
so
something.
many thoughts right now.
Yeah.
Because
That's so sad.
even with the trans people I've worked with, there are differing thoughts of what kinds of surgeries do I want to have, right? Some people say, I want to have bottom surgeries, as soon as possible. Some people say, I want to wait until science is a little bit better, so it actually looks like a real penis, right? Some people say, I want to keep the genitals that I have because I don't want to lose any sort of sexual sensation because it feels good and I'm okay with it. And, I just want to keep that. And then what you're talking about too, people who have, health issues, that kind of thing. I was working with an older woman in her 60s at one point, and she was postmenopausal, and she also had breast cancer, and she had surgeries, and all these different kinds of things, changing the physiology in your body, changing your hormones, changing how your body is functioning, right? And a lot of times too, medical professionals aren't very well versed in this is something we talked about at the conference too, is
Bring it on.
We're not, I'm like, oh, I just love this. Medical professionals, aren't as well versed in like sexual dysfunctions either, right? There was some research done about what medical students are learning, in medical school, and there was your basic STDs, anatomy, reproduction, those kinds of things, but not as much on, gender or identity or, even like, physical experiences of discomfort when, there's not necessarily a physical reason for that. Right? How do I talk to my clients or my patients about, their sexual issues, in the like medical office,
right?
Before they get to me, those conversations aren't really happening either. And so that's kind of a disappointing, part of what I do too is, there's a huge gap in where people can even access, a professional to talk about this kind of thing.
So could you kind of clarify that a little bit? I wasn't really quite following.
Sure.
Also because your little dog, she just got out of her bed.
Kind of the lack of, the lack of education for medical professionals around like sexual dysfunctions. Sexual dysfunctions kind of being, again, that's very all over the place as well, right? Levels of interest, people having issues having an orgasm, right? A lot of people don't necessarily want to go to their physician and say, hey, I haven't really had an orgasm in a while.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, especially if you don't, going all the way back to just the oppression of talking about sex. And
well, and then I think that, again, being yogis like we are, excuse me, sorry, we are so focused on like the mind-body connection, right? Yeah. And then if you get into a lot of times mental health professionals focused on the mental side of things, right?
Right.
A lot of mental health professionals don't ask about physical experiences in the body and that kind of thing. Medical professionals focused on the physical, right? Not asking what's going on, with your mind, what's going on here, can I explore that more, right? And so, I'm really trying to kind of bridge that gap of, okay, how can we talk about all of that stuff? It's all relevant and it's all connected, like we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's kind of a miss on both sides too, right? I mean, the mental health professionals, that I'm in, not a whole lot of the like physical understanding.
At your conference, they talked about this, right? What were some of the what were some takeaways from this conversation?
I think more of it was just kind of that fact,
bringing awareness to it. Like
awareness.
There's a total disconnect.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of broadening this more. That's kind of more my takeaway. The conversation itself was, people in medical school don't get a lot of training in certain things that we are focused on.
Right. Yeah.
And so there was just kind of this presentation of this is what medical students are learning. Here's where we can do better.
Right. Were there medical professionals at the conference?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Is there any, going off of this conversation, is there any suggestions that you would give to the listeners who have both a physician and a therapist? Like, do you encourage there to be conversation between those two people?
Well, first of all, if you have a therapist and a physician, incredible job.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, good work. A lot of people don't, right? There's so much stigma around mental health.
I know.
Right? And so just, we know that in general.
#mental
right?
awareness health month.
Right? Happy May.
Yeah.
But so incredible, right? I would say, if you are, a patient in a doctor's office, right? Not to be afraid of speaking up, right? Of like, hey, I'm kind of concerned about this. I'm having pain here, or I'm having, thoughts of this, or whatever it is. And hopefully your, physician or whoever you're seeing will have some kind of resource for you. That's kind of where, my hope is for the medical field is, for listeners who are in the medical field, whether you're, a physician, an assistant, a secretary, whatever you might be, a nurse, to talk about those things, to say like, hey, this is important too, right? Let's make sure we have resources so when our patients come in, we can look at them, in all aspects.
Yeah.
Because we get so kind of closed-minded on, well, I'm the physician, and so I'm going to look at this. And I'm not saying that for everybody, right? There are incredible physicians out there who do that, and incredible mental health professionals who, ask about the physical aspects as well. But just kind of, in general, kind of these majorities of people who, and whether it's, and a lot of it might be not knowing, right? What are my resources for that, right? Even, with like professionals who might be listening, right? There are so many, just medical professionals, physicians, mental health practitioners, social workers, all these kinds of things, to not close yourself off, right? So many people, honestly, especially in Spokane, close themselves off and just say, okay, well, I've got my working business and things are going well, and I'm just going to stay in my little bubble, right? But not like networking and getting to know professionals who really do these kinds of things, so that we can be giving, the best care to our clients as we can, right? Okay. There's a lot of this culture of, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of keep to myself, right? Like, what about networking? Like, I want to get to know you, right? I don't want to refer somebody if I don't know who this person is or know what they do. So that's what my hope is, right? To just like, why don't we all just work together?
That's right? A great point. Yeah, there is a lot of silos. Even talking about your health, being in the healthcare professional world that you're in, there's so many silos. And once you become a physician or a therapist, it sounds like once you're there, you get, and you can silo yourself off of, oh, I'm only a family doctor, or I'm only a family counselor or kid counselor.
Well, and I think it's important to, like, have a specialty, right? So what my hope is that, because if you're doing everything, then you're not going to be really good at doing something. Right? That's kind of my thought around this. And so, my focus being more on the sexuality realm, I don't necessarily want to take on other clients who, I can't see people with like eating disorders. I don't have any training in that.
Totally.
I don't have very specific, trauma-based training either. So if we get to a place where, I'm working with my client and turns out there's this massive trauma that's happened in their past, okay, why don't you go see somebody who does that, and they can help you through that trauma, and then we can continue this work together. And so they're really getting the best care. So I'm not just trying to do that trauma work with them because they're my client when I'm not going to do the best job, right? So my hope is that, with more people specializing in something, being a really incredible couples counselor, being a really incredible eating disorders counselor, personality disorders, whatever it might be good at that. And then we can all, like, if we get to know each other and say, hey, you're the person that does this, I'm going to send these clients to you because I know they're going to get the best care doing that. Right? And so same with like blending with, medical professionals too, or, physicians, that kind of thing of, hey, know that when you go see your OB, if you have an issue, and you need to come see a counselor, I know that they can send people to me because they're like, oh, it's like a sex-related issue. Go talk to somebody about this in depth. And see if you can explore that more.
Yeah. It's so cool how you're like merging those two worlds together, by the way. I know that you don't do everything, but at least encouraging your patients to drop into their bodies is huge. One place in town that you would suggest people go, what would you suggest?
For yoga?
For anything.
Oh, no, for anything. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to make you do that.
That people go?
Yeah, like check out, explore, go to eat.
Oh my gosh.
Look at.
I'm trying to think of some of my favorite. I'm like, I just want to be outside all the time. I'm a big water person. So we have like a million lakes around here. So obviously my favorite lake is Ponderay out in Sandpoint. But gosh, if you can get yourself out to any lake, we've got like Loon Lake, we've got Diamond Lake, we've got, Medical Lake, we've got all these places around, right? There's like a million. So go to a lake, go do something fun. But even just in town, gosh, I love me some Wellness Tree. People probably say that a lot, but
Era said that.
Yeah. Wellness Tree is great. But what else?
Wellness Tree is really good in the Perry district. Okay, so then last question: what does yoga mean to you?
Oh my gosh. what does yoga mean to me? I'm like, I could just go off all over the place with this one.
You could sit with it if you need to.
Well, yoga to me means accessing myself, like my true self, right? So we were talking about, can I just meet myself on the mat in that moment, right? I mean, we're talking about all this mindfulness and that kind of thing, but it really helps me access that. And whether that's me being on my mat in a class, at a studio or at my house, or if it's me driving in the car, right? Like we're talking about like my yoga being, how am I breathing? How am I just seeing the world around me? It means, I'm interacting with the world in a beautiful way that's non-judgmental, that's non-critical, that's compassionate and loving. So I think that's what it means to me.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. Yeah. Kind of coming from like your own true seat, like your own true place of intention.
Yeah.
So you can leave like every situation feeling like full or like content with like your approach there.
Yeah.
And like happy to go on. Like you're able to mindfully move forward with like whatever's next. So
yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing.
You're so welcome.
It's awesome, and I just am really excited to see where you go with it. I mean, continue to break down those barriers, network, get to know people. Yeah, you will. It's just gonna take time, but you have that intention. So yeah. Thank you.
You're so welcome. This was so wonderful.
It was nice. I know. I loved it. Thank you. Cool. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for being on the podcast and talking openly about sex. I love the concept of how sex goes way beyond the bedroom. Jocelyn is accepting new patients. I'll link to her contact info and website in the show notes. Also, if you want to catch Jocelyn teaching, you can find her at the Union, and I'll link to her yoga schedule in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. Reviews do wonders for the show. Also, please share the podcast with your friends through social media or by word of mouth. I am very thankful for each of you for showing love to the podcast and for supporting it. I'll talk to you next time. Until then, let's chat on social media, and please, please, please love on yourself. Namaste and Shanti peace.